Bad marketing done consistently will outperform good marketing done inconsistently.
If you're investing, investors will.
The podcast for all things real estate investing.
So welcome back to another episode of Investor One-on-One. Today I'm sitting down with someone who's making real estate investing a whole lot easier. He's the founder of Invelo, a powerful platform that helps investors pull lists, run marketing campaigns, track leads, and actually see what's working. It's like having a CRM, a marketing team, and a coach all in one. After starting in venture capital and flipping houses, he saw how chaotic the sales and marketing side of investing could be and built a tool to fix it. Now Invelo is helping investors all over scale smarter, faster, and with real data behind every move. So thanks for joining us and welcome to the show, Justin Silverio.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to this.
For sure, man. I'm excited, as I said. So can you start by sharing a bit about your personal journey and how you got into
Yeah.
investing and built your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, even before I started real estate investing, I was an accountant in venture capital private equity. And I loved the industry. I loved working and learning more about entrepreneurs. And I always knew that was my path, but I didn't know where the entrepreneurial journey was going to take me. So I learned about real estate investing back in maybe 2010 and thought it was like really fascinating. So I got started with that. Started flipping houses and got really good at finding deals off market. And so much so that people are like, hey, how are you finding these deals? So most of it was through I was doing direct mail. And so I had a very good strategy on that, which led me to then building a company, Open Letter Marketing, for direct mail to help other investors throughout the country. Fast forward a little bit longer. A little bit later, around 2020, I started to look at another big void in the market, which was technology. And as you alluded to or mentioned, the huge stumbling block for people is being consistent and doing direct-to-seller marketing properly, staying organized, and having the tools to help them scale their company. And many investors use many different platforms, and most investors use 3 to 4 platforms throughout their whole sales cycle. And I was like, well, there's a lot of disjointed software out there. And we were aiming to create something all under one roof so the investor can really have everything that they need for their whole sales journey within what platform, and then get the analytics and KPIs to understand truly how their business is operating and make sure they have those fine tweaks to increase performance. So that was my journey, and man, what an interesting journey where it's led. But the very first point of like my goal was purely on spending more time with family, and I think that's a lot of people's journey. And then the life changes and goals change and stuff like that. But that's still been like my big number one is always have a lifestyle where I can spend a lot of time with my family. And we were talking about traveling right before this, and do more traveling with them. So that's always been a big part of it.
I love that, man. So over the last few years, what kind of changes have you seen in direct to seller marketing? And what do you think is working the best right now?
So I think the biggest shift for people is since COVID hit, I've never seen it before. So I've always been a very big advocate of don't just market to everyone. Right? And a lot of people were doing that prior to COVID. They were just blasting out marketing to everyone, whatever the marketing channel was. And then once COVID hit, I really started to see people dial in their marketing spend and not reduce it to reduce it, but to be more intentional and to really hone in and find, okay, I have these 10,000 prospects that I want to market to, but which ones are my best quality prospects to market to? And then they're really going after like the targeted marketing. So that's been like a big shift, which I'm really happy with because I know and I've seen that is how you drive ROI. And I've always been a big preacher of doing that. So I've seen that shift. But then the other piece is, with the market, especially right now, people that are consistent, just like any other market, are going to be the winners in today's market. And as long as you're honing in and finding the best prospects and are being consistent, you will outdrive anyone else. And there's a lot of fluctuation in that. And I'm seeing the newer investors get a little bit scared of where the market is, or they're spending some money, they're not getting a deal yet, and they stop. And that's like the worst thing that they can do. So I would say those are the biggest things right now that people need to focus on.
I like that. And as you said, a lot of new investors are kind of like scared right now. They don't know where the market's going, but there's always so much noise and shiny objects, especially in real estate investing.
Oh,
How do
huge. Yeah.
exactly. How do you think new investors can avoid distractions and focus on what really matters?
Yeah, I think that they need to come into it understanding like what is their focus, what are they looking to do, and make sure they stick with it. Because there's many times, like we were just talking about, so many people are doing so many things in real estate, which is one of the reasons that attracted me to real estate. I'm like, there's so many ways to make money. It's incredible. But focus is one of the most important keys to success. What you have to do, especially when you're building a business. And the more that you're kind of looking in a different direction, the less you're creating a strong business. So for me, it's always like get your core understanding of what it is that you want to do in investing and focus all your energy and effort into it. Because somebody that might be having success in a different kind of form of investing doesn't mean that you will. It might be kind of within their line of what they're focused on, what they want to do. They might have a completely different strategy that you don't want to get into. And I'll give you an example. Like at the very core, I never wanted to be a volume-based investor. I wanted to do a handful of projects, maybe 8 to 10 deals, mostly wholesaling, and then I would just take on projects that I'm making over $100,000 a deal. And I'm like, okay, if I did 5 deals, I'll make a $500,000. Where other investors, they're like, I'm going to do 100 deals, and I'm going to make $20,000, each deal. I never wanted to get in that game just because I didn't want to do volume. So for that pure aspect, that just didn't fit within how I wanted to do it. So I just focused on kind of my niche. So yeah,
I like the way you said that though, because it's very important having a strategy, especially in this industry. Because if not, you can lose yourself. So with a strategy, you can have targeted goals, you can see how you're growing. And as you said, I come from the tech world. So when I came to this industry, I was like, whoa, this is much crazier than what I thought. I
yeah.
just thought you just buy a house, you improve it, and that's it. But there's so many things to this industry, and that's what makes it really beautiful. On to my next question, though. Are there any marketing channels or strategies you think investors are not using enough, but really should be paying attention to, especially, now?
So I'll give you some. I guess I have a couple ways to answer that. One is that investor. I think the first thing, especially with newer investors, is any channel that they want to use can likely work. You hear about investors using cold calling or texting, right? Texting and stuff like that. You have to really be careful about TCPA regulations. But people are having success in different marketing channels. But I think the most important thing is when somebody gets into direct to seller marketing, make sure you're doing a marketing channel that you can stick with for at least 6 months. Okay? Because if you push yourself into doing like cold calling, for example, and you absolutely hate cold calling, like somebody that has been doing it for maybe a couple weeks, they're going to get super frustrated and stop because they don't even want to do it to begin with. So when I see that, that's why going back to consistency, the number one thing is understand, and it really boils down to, do you have more time or more money? If you have more time, do those things like, cold calling or door knocking that you can do that you don't have to spend a lot of money, but it takes up your time, but just make sure you can stick with it. If you have more money, then you can do maybe things like direct mail or hire a cold caller, or you can do text messaging and stuff like that. So I would say that's the first thing. As far as like the avenue that people should go down, when they get started, focus on one avenue. Again, as I mentioned, what you feel most comfortable with. I loved direct mail. I got started in it because I had a full-time job, and I was like, you know what? I don't have time to call people, so I'm going to send out a bunch of mail. And my wife, when we got started, we would do 500 letters a week, and we would send that out, and we would get the calls in. And then somebody called and I got an email notification. And as soon as I got that email notification, I'd step out of my, like the office and make the call to the person. Because I liked just answering calls and it didn't take much time. And during the, lunch break, I can just answer or call people back. So that's why I started with direct mail. It took very little time of mine, but just to call people back. So focus on one avenue and really understand it first. And then as you start to gradually, get more deals, you have a little bit more time or money to spend, adding in different touch points. So we see a really big spike in response rates when you combine like direct mail to say text messaging or cold calling. When you're referring and saying in your text or cold call, you're like, hey, I sent you a letter in the mail about your property. I just want to make sure you got it, right? Something like that doesn't come off as marketing form and more as, that you're interested or you're trying to reach out to that person specifically. And we see huge response rates in doing that when you're combining. So when you do these kind of omnipresence and coming at the your prospects in different forms in different ways, that really helps you to build that response rate. And then you can't forget about like online marketing as well, because most people nowadays will always look and go online to see who you are, what you do. So they'll look at website or reviews. So that's always important to just put a little bit of an emphasis on doing that and making sure that you have some good reviews and you have a good website.
I couldn't agree more, especially the last part. These people that are selling their homes, there's so many people out there. They can feel very vulnerable sometimes. So if you have that background, and that trust, that puts you ahead of the game more than any other investor. And I know we spoke a little bit about consistency, strategy, and you just spoke about, following up and having that omni-channel presence. What do you think separates investors who consistently close deals from those who feel stuck and can't seem to get traction?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's all about if you're talking about from a marketing perspective, it's all about consistency. That is the number one downfall that I see where most people go wrong is because, especially when they start. So I did some coaching, a few years ago, and the number one thing when people start direct to seller marketing and start spending money and they don't get a deal, they immediately get scared and they want to stop. So like what I found is when I'm providing the education to people, it goes from education to being like, the psychologist of like, stay in the game. It's going to be okay. Just let it go. This is the pattern. 3 to 4 touches when you reach out to them is usually when you get more calls back and you get some deals. So that's the biggest thing. And your mind is one of the biggest deterrents when you're going through this process. You're going to try to talk yourself out of continuing to do something. But again, it's the most important thing is to be consistent. I've seen it time and time again. The more consistent you are, the better you'll do. And you have to give yourself a break too. When you're starting out and you have people calling in and you're like, oh, I can't get any deals. You have to go through that education and learning process. You might not even know what a deal looks like. Like I missed tons of deals when I got started. So, and I knew that, but right now I probably would have closed, 50 more deals than I did back that I would today than I would back then because I just know more. So you have to go through that education piece. So whatever you do, PPC, direct mail, text messaging, cold calling, make sure that you are just very, very consistent and give yourself that running room. Like 4 to 6 months, I always tell people you have to commit to because you will see deals. You just have to be consistent.
I agree. Sometimes we see new investors sign up with us and they get a few leads and then all of a sudden they're like scared and then they're like, okay,
Yeah,
let me try something else. But like if you don't commit into one channel, you won't get that one deal. And then you're just
yeah.
gonna,
And it's so hard too because they're like, well, yeah, it's easy for you to say because you want me to continue to spend money with you. And it's like, oh, like I wish I could like, say it in a different way or provide that feedback because it really truly is the number one goal. It's just consistency. And that's why we really try to push the education on like open letter marketing. If somebody's new, is get them into the mindset to understand that, you have to look at a 4 to 6 month run rate. So what is your budget and what's your budget over the next 6 months? And let's create an actual campaign to span that whole timeline. So you're just, again, consistent. And that's what we really focus on with Invelo as well, of the whole process and the automation of everything. So you can be very consistent because the other piece is like people get busy and then they forget to do their marketing. When in Invelo, everything's automated, so you never skip and don't have those kind of ups and downs of when you're sending out marketing, when you have time, when you get deals and you're like, oh crap, I forgot to send out my marketing because I'm so busy. It just puts everything on autopilot, so deal rate is much more consistent.
So Justin, you've been in this industry for a while, and as I can see, you have a lot of knowledge. Looking ahead to 2025, How are the best operators building their teams and systems around acquisitions? And do you see any new trends coming up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest trend, no doubt about it, is AI coming into the space more and more every day. I think that's going to be a huge component for people. I think there's going to be a time where, people can scale down their kind of businesses from people to AI, but I also want to make sure that people preface that with, AI is not the answer to everything. I think there still is a lot that the human component will still need to play a part. Like, AI is not going to change the fact that you have to go into a house to look at it and to talk to somebody face to face and build that rapport with them to give them that comfort. But I see that coming into a lot of even our tech. We're already starting to look at and work on some AI that integrates into our CRM to make the business owner more intelligent and know what's happening in their business to the degree of they know which new prospects that they need to reach out to because they just closed similar deals right in the last. So we will be able to understand and provide more suggestions on like, hey, you closed this deal. Here's some more suggestions on other deals or other properties that might be like good for you based on the characteristics or whatnot. So I think that's going to be a huge component going into 2025 is just a lot more AI that people are going to be kind of working through.
If an investor is getting a lot of leads but struggling to convert them, what would you tell them to first focus on? And if there's any case studies of, you know,
Yeah.
any investors using your platform, I'd love to hear more about that and the results they're getting.
Yeah, so I mean, it's all about understanding where you're losing the most opportunities. So if they're getting a lot of leads in that people are like, hey, I'm interested in selling, but they are lacking in closing those deals, then obviously it's, your sales tactics that you need to make sure that you're focusing on. And within the platform, we do have like lead pipelines that people can understand, where each lead is in the process and if they get stuck in a point in the process. And we can even trigger automations that, create the lead follow-up very easy. Because I think that's one of the biggest points is people don't do lead follow-up properly. And if anybody, that's been in the investing game a long time, they know probably 80% or more of their leads come through lead follow-up. So having a really, really good lead follow-up system is critical, is absolutely critical to your business. I mean, 8 out of 10 deals are going to come through lead follow-up. So that's why we've really put a big emphasis on automation within Invelo and making sure that people are always being top of mind with the seller. So we have that type of automation flow to create tasks, remind people to make calls. We can automate direct mail, text messages, emails. We can do all that in the platform, which is really critical to people's success.
For the follow-up, like you said, what do you think is more important? Just being very consistent and being on every channel, or is it what you say to the seller that makes it more crucial?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think it could be depending on where the seller fell off. I think it could be a little bit of both. So, for instance, there's really only five, maybe 4 or 5 reasons that you need to follow up with somebody. It's like they want too much money. Maybe they want too much money. They're not interested in selling right now. They're getting maybe offers from other people, right? There's only a few limited things. So for people that are like, yeah, they want too much money, like less touch points scattered throughout is probably much better. And usually what I think about too is like how I reach out to them. If I've had conversations with them on the phone, then I try to always have follow-ups that is just as personal. So either it's a phone call, it's a phone call to voicemail or text message, right? That's much more personal. If it's somebody that is like, hey, I'm not looking to sell until next year, I might follow up with them a direct mail piece. Or if I can't get in touch with them by phone and text, I will send them direct mail. I'll try to use those other avenues. But it should always be a conversation of where the last conversation led off to. But you can still generalize it in those 4 to 5 buckets anyways. So I think it's a little bit of a mix of both, but it's more strategy based on which one's more important, depending on where the conversation left off.
Those are some really good insights. Thanks for sharing. Let's talk a little bit more about scaling. Well, scaling can be tricky. How do you recommend investors grow their business while still staying lean and profitable, especially with today's market? That's always
Yeah. Dude, scaling is the one of the most challenging things. People are like, oh, it's exciting to scale, but it's so hard to do because it's the one time that you will realize and it will be painful on where your weakness is in your business. So before people start to scale, it's always make sure you have a sound company, business, right? You have a good, you understand where you're getting your data from. You're dialed in with your marketing. You know your KPIs and numbers. You have a good lead acquisitions flow. You have a good lead follow-up flow, and you have a good system for dispositions and transaction coordination. Now, it can be one person doing all that, right? Because with real estate, it's not like unless you're going to go from marketing to 1,000 people to marketing to 100,000 people, you're probably not going to scale crazy quick. So you can do it in a way that's not so such a spike. But I would say make sure you're comfortable with all the components that you're working on right now, and then it all starts from the beginning, right? So just get more marketing, and if you don't want to scale too quickly, maybe you do like another 25% of the marketing you were doing before. And then you need in my eyes, anytime you scale, you don't want to continue to scale and go like 25% growth every month, right? Because you will outpace yourself and you'll likely not be able to, because if you're the only one taking the calls, you're going to get too many calls coming in or too many leads that you won't be able to do anything with it. And that's one of the worst things that you can do because you're wasting a ton of money on marketing, but you're not doing anything with those leads. So I'm a big advocate of like make sure that you start to scale slowly, make sure that you level off and plateau and see how everything's working. If it's a little bit too much for you to handle, then bring somebody in and just make sure that when you hire somebody, you can offset their cost with what's coming in. And we could do a whole nother episode on like your first hire, which is the scariest damn thing in the world. But you have to get past that because that's probably the most important thing you can do when scaling is get past that first hire. And you might not think you have enough running rate or running room or like money in the bank and stuff like that. But you have to like kind of push that stuff to the side. But anyways, I would say scale first, make sure you stabilize. If you need to bring somebody on, do that. Make sure they're trained up properly. Hiring and training somebody it's a really tough thing to do. And then again, make sure that they're stabilized, make sure they're hitting your KPIs that you were doing before. And once you do that, you have a recipe for hiring somebody in that position, then you can scale that position again. So it's not going to be as fast as people want, unless they have a lot of money to experiment with. But if you want to do it, in the most cost-effective way, that's what I would recommend.
well said. And talking about hiring, I just came back from a mastermind, and it's crazy how many people struggle with that part.
Oh,
And
dude,
I
it's
didn't think
so
that much. It's a lot of people are talking about that. So
yeah, that is a huge struggling point for people. And for me, it was like, not just, the money component when I was first hiring my first hire, it was, are they going to do it as well as I do? And it delayed the hire for so long. And then once I hired and I got into a groove, I was like, God damn it, why didn't I do this faster? Right? Because we would have been like so much more down the line, but you got to just do it.
especially today when people are hiring remote and people are hiring local, it's like all over the place. So it's something that, investors are having trouble with, but over time, I feel like people find out their solutions.
I was just going to say, and it all comes down to like, what is their objective? If they want to be the only person ever doing it and spending all their time in the business, that's one thing. But if you want the freedom, like I mentioned before, my goal is the freedom to be with my family. I knew I couldn't be the main component. So I just knew that hiring and training and managing had to be part of my core necessity in my business. Like, and over time, it's more of like, I'm always building myself as a better team member, manager, and like, teammate with everybody here to make sure that I can get them to give their best in their company. And it aligns with kind of what their objectives are too in life. So the more that they can feel committed, the better the company does. So it all kind of rotates around that.
And in your experience, what's one step in the deal pipeline that most investors overlook but can really make or break a business?
Mm. Um, That's a good one. I would say, the more and more I talk to investors, I think the more it's about starting with good data. I really do believe that, and I still see that a lot today. Even people that are doing a lot of marketing, they don't look at their data and take it as seriously as they need to when they start to market. And I see them, pulling some, random lists and then sending marketing out. And when I got started, like I was like, I know I'm going to spend a lot of money on the data that I pull. So I want to spend time and energy in knowing what I'm doing. And some people are like, you know what, I'm going to just pay somebody and the, predictive companies to do it, to pull the data for me before I start marketing, which is fine. But I always wanted to be in front and understand that data so I can understand if, I'm getting deals more from this list. How did I pull that list? What did I do? How can I maybe enhance it? And if I want to go into another market, I know what data is going to provide different results. So I would say, data is really critical in your business. And if you're marketing to the wrong people, you're not going to have as good as results if you're marketing to the right people. So I don't see too many people putting a huge emphasis on data, which is why I would say that's probably most critical because that starts your foundation for everything.
What exactly are you looking for when looking at a new market?
In a new market, or when I'm looking in a new market, I would go back to the old, again, going to scaling, right? If I'm marketing in a given area and I want to go into a new market, I'm going to basically use the same recipe that I just did in my existing market. But if I'm going into a brand new market, I look at things and I'm like, okay, well, when I get started in direct to seller, I know the population size should be about 125,000 to 200,000 in population. There's about 50,000 properties probably in that area. And from there, I want to pull, and I mean, probably need another episode to go through all the different types of lists to stack to understand motivation. But you should get down to about 10 to 12,000 records, which then you can sift down to about 2,500 to maybe 3,000 records of really high quality. So that's kind of always how I look at things and how I niche it down using data. And then over time, it's like, okay, now we just need to look at the results. Where am I getting the most leads and deals, and how can I replicate this in a new area?
Well said. I know we spoke about so many different factors that make investors successful. One of them is speed, especially speed to
Mm.
big, big topic. How important is a quick follow-up
Oh,
today? And do you have
dude.
any tips for optimizing response time?
Yes. It's funny. We were just talking about this with my COO today in like our sales process in one of our companies. And we were talking about speed to lead. And it's absolutely critical. And especially like PPC, you get, leads that are coming through PPC, PPL online on your website. The importance of you want to make sure that you are talking to that person or following up with them within like 15 minutes. After that, it's going to be so much harder to get them on the phone. They're going to be moved off to another, talking to somebody else potentially if it's online because they're already searching. I would say speed to lead is absolutely critical for any form of marketing because I knew when I was doing direct mail, if I didn't get them back on the phone, there could be times that I'm following up with them with like six, seven, eight times. And it's not the fact that they don't want to talk to me or they're like, oh, I'm not interested anymore. People get busy and they're not in the frame of mind right now to talk about what they did want to talk about and they were ready to talk about 20 minutes or an hour ago or yesterday. So people need to make sure they like speak to somebody right away as fast as they possibly can, to make sure that that person's still in the mindset and they're not moved off to somebody else. And even if it's a text message and it's like, hey, I saw that you called, sorry, I'll give you a call back in a few minutes or in an hour or something like that. I'm in a meeting. That right there could potentially stop them from going to a competitor to like giving them a call to see how they can help them out. So I think that's really important.
I agree, man. And sadly, we're on our last question. This is kind of a question that breaks down into like three different parts. But first of all, if you had to start from scratch today with nothing besides your experience, how would you start? And then following up on that, what's one piece of advice or quote that every investor should know? And then what's next for you in life and in business?
Wow. Wow. That's a lot. Okay. So starting real estate investing with the knowledge that I know from scratch,
Mhm.
again, I'd go back and if you want to say with very, very limited funds, first thing I would do is I would research and find out what market I want to get into, right? Going back to that strategy, okay, I want to start maybe wholesaling and or flipping entry level homes. Okay, where is that market? Where do I need to be? So understanding the geography, like I mentioned before, making sure I have that, and then going in to start scraping or pulling data. From there, depending on my resources and marketing, then I would start marketing to those people and reaching out. At the same time, I would start networking and talking to everyone that I can because I did get deals from other investors, other real estate agents, pocket listings, stuff like that. So I would also start to do that, and it's really just taking action. So those are the steps that I would literally do to just rebuild my investment business. So that's the first one. Quote. I don't really have any quote. The only other thing I'm just going to go back to the thing that I like to say, going back to marketing and just remembering, is if you remember nothing else from this conversation, just make sure that you understand that consistency is the number one most important thing when it comes to direct to seller marketing. And I don't think I made it. I don't know if I made this quote up or if it came from somebody else. So, but I always say, you know, bad marketing done consistently will outperform good marketing done inconsistently. And I want to make sure that people understand that because just take action. You don't have to look around and say, is this the best perfect thing? Just do something and stay consistent and you will learn over time what works. And I really think that that's an important piece. So I guess that's the quote one. And then the last question is what's next for, I guess, me? My biggest thing, like I'm really excited about making intelligent, making things more intelligent or easier for customers. Like understanding deeply what people struggle with and make it so easy for them to help them grow their business. Because most people in this business are looking for, freedom or for money, whatever the purpose is, and they're not born like entrepreneurs. They usually get into this business for one other form of reason. And I want to make sure that, so we have kind of an added piece on our CRM that we need to provide education. And we need to provide them with that understanding that they might not have on a business sense, on like how, their conversion rates are and how they could potentially improve them, right? Doing stuff like that is really, really exciting for me because I know it'll change the shape and people's lives. And I love that stuff. So just getting more into tech, more into AI, and providing more value and education to people. I think that's my biggest thing. I love sharing, my journey with other people, and if they can learn from it, I get excited about it. So that's kind of what I do a little bit in these businesses.
I love that. And for life, what's next for you in beautiful Boston, as we spoke?
Yeah. Life. So I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. So we used to travel a ton, and now my 14-year-old's like, all right, I want to be around friends a little bit more. So we're spending more time, having more people at our house and her friends. So that's our focus until, like, I'm already thinking about when they go off to college, like what's next for us. And I know my wife and I want to travel, get back to traveling a lot more. So those are like the next life steps for us is being around the kids as much as possible. We only have, 5 more years with them and it goes by fast. So just focusing on that. And then next step is, spending more time with my wife because it's all about the kids right now. And when the kids are off, it's going to be spending more time with my wife and doing things that we really enjoy and experience, ourselves. So that's our kind of personal path anyways, our family path.
I love that, man. Well, Justin, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on Investor One-on-One. If our investors want to connect with you and learn more, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to send you a link if you want to but we can give them, there's 2 things. We can give them some discounts on open letter marketing and Invelo. So they can, if they're interested in taking a look at that, but also they can just shoot me an email. Like I answer all my emails. So they can email me at justin@inveloapp.com, veloapp.com. So they can email me if they have any questions at all.
Sounds good. And I'll link that below. And to everyone watching, thanks again for tuning in. Stay connected for more interviews with the nation's top investors. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. Appreciate it.